It's 3 in the morning and you can't sleep again. Not because of noise, not because you're not tired, but because there's this thing, this presence, this weight sitting on your chest that has no name but feels absolutely real. Fear. And you've tried everything, haven't you? You've read the books, you've listened to the motivational speakers, you've repeated the affirmations. I am strong, I am brave, I will conquer this fear. But here you are, 3 in the morning, and the fear is still there. Maybe quieter, maybe more subtle, but there, always there, like a shadow you can't shake, like an enemy you can't defeat. And so you fight. You push against it. You try to overcome it, to transcend it, to be bigger than it. You tense up, you armor yourself, you prepare for battle. But what if I told you that this fight, this entire war you've been waging against your own fear, is the problem? What if the fight itself is what keeps the fear alive? What if you don't overcome fear by fighting it? What if you overcome fear by seeing through it? By recognizing that there was never anything real to defend in the first place? What if the person you've been protecting all these years doesn't actually exist? If you're awake right now, if your mind won't stop spinning, if you're tired of being afraid, this transmission is for you. Let's talk about fear, but not the way you've heard before. There's something Alan Watts said that most people misunderstand. He said, the only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. Most people hear that and think it's about being brave, about conquering fear, about becoming strong enough to face the chaos. But that's not what he meant at all. What he meant was this. You can't fight the river. You can't punch water. You can't defeat a wave. The only way to survive the ocean is to stop pretending you're separate from it. And fear? Fear is exactly like that. It's not something outside of you attacking. It's not an enemy you need to defeat. It's a wave in the ocean of your own consciousness, and you're trying to punch it. And I know why you fight. Because that's what everyone taught you. Be strong, be brave, don't let fear control you. Overcome it, conquer it, show it who's the boss. And so you clench, you resist, you build walls, you create armor, you turn yourself into a fortress designed to keep fear out. But here's what nobody told you. The fortress is the problem. The armor is the cage. The walls you build to keep fear out are the same walls keeping you trapped inside. Because fear isn't attacking you from outside. Fear is the sensation of defending something that was never real in the first place. Think about it. Really think about it. What are you defending when you're afraid? Your image? But you're not an image. Your awareness having an experience. Your identity? But identity is just a story you tell about a collection of memories that are already gone. Your body? The body is already changing, already dying, already returning to the earth with every breath. Your future? The future doesn't exist. It's a thought happening now, in this present moment. So what exactly are you protecting? What is this you that needs defending? And when you really look, when you really investigate, you find nothing. Or rather, you find everything. You find that there is no separate self that needs protection. There's just life, just consciousness, just this present moment expressing itself through a temporary form. And the fear is what happens when you forget this. When you believe the story that there's a small, separate, vulnerable self that needs to be defended against a hostile universe. But here's the beautiful part, the terrifying part, the part that changes everything. When you see that there is nothing to defend, fear doesn't need to be overcome. It just dissolves. Like mist in sunlight, not because you defeated it, but because you saw through the illusion that created it. This isn't about becoming fearless in the way you think. It's not about being so strong that nothing scares you. It's about seeing that the you who was afraid never existed as a separate entity in the first place. If something in you just shifted, if you felt something open, leave a comment with just one word: dissolve. Because recognizing that there's nothing to defend is the first step to freedom from fear itself. So how does this work? How do you see through fear instead of fighting it? Let's dive deep. Really deep. To a place where words almost fail, but truth becomes clear. Truth becomes clear. Alan Watts had this way of pointing to something profound with the simplest observations. He once said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." Think about that. Really sit with it. When you're afraid, there's a sense of a you that's in danger, a self that needs protecting, a someone who might be hurt, rejected, destroyed, annihilated. And so you defend. You create strategies. You build psychological armor. You rehearse conversations. You avoid situations. You control what you can control. But who is this defender? Where is this self that needs protecting? Close your eyes for a moment, right now, and try to find the one who is afraid. Not the feeling of fear. That's easy to find. The tightness in your chest, the tension in your stomach, the racing thoughts. But find the actual entity, the actual self, the actual person who is experiencing the fear. Where is it? Is it in your head, behind your eyes, in your chest, in your thoughts? And what you'll discover if you look honestly is that you can't find it. You can find sensations. You can find thoughts. You can find emotions. But the actual separate self, the actual independent entity that's supposedly in danger, isn't there. There's just awareness, just consciousness, just this present moment of experiencing. And this is where it gets interesting. Because if there's no separate self, then who exactly is in danger? What exactly needs defending? The body? The body doesn't need defending in the way you think. The body has its own intelligence, its own immune system, its own survival instincts that work perfectly fine without your psychological interference. In fact, when a real threat appears, the body responds instantly. You jump away from the snake before your mind even registered what happened. You pull your hand from the fire before you think fire is hot. The body knows how to protect itself. It doesn't need your story about needing to be safe. So what's really being defended? It's the image, the identity, the story you tell about who you are. I am someone who is competent. I am someone who is loved. I am someone who has it together. I am someone who is in control. And fear arises when this image is threatened, when reality might reveal that the story isn't true, that you're not as competent as you pretend, that you're not as loved as you need to be, that you don't have it together, that you're not in control. But here's the thing, that image was never you. That story was never true. That identity you've been defending so fiercely is just a collection of thoughts, memories, and beliefs that you learned to call me. And defending it is like defending a shadow, like protecting a reflection, like guarding a dream. Alan Watts put it this way: man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun. You've taken this identity so seriously. You've made it so solid, so real, so important that you're willing to spend your entire life in fear, protecting something that was never more than a story. And the beautiful, terrifying truth is this: you can stop. Right now. You can stop defending. You can stop protecting. You can stop pretending there's a small, separate self that needs guarding. Not because you've become enlightened, not because you've achieved some special state, but simply because you saw through the illusion. You bit your own teeth and realized there's nothing to bite. And when that happens, when you really see this, fear doesn't need to be overcome. It just doesn't make sense anymore. It's like being afraid of your own shadow. Once you realize it's just a shadow, the fear becomes absurd. Not because shadows aren't real, but because you see they can't hurt you. They were never separate from you. They were always just you projected. So the question isn't, how do I become strong enough to defeat fear? The question is, who is afraid? And when you really look, when you really investigate, you can't find them. There's just life. Just this. Just now. And the fear? The fear is what happens when you forget this and start believing in the story of a separate self again. But you don't need to fight the story. You don't need to overcome the belief. You just need to see it clearly. And in that seeing, in that clear recognition of what's real and what's illusion, the fear dissolves. Not because you defeated it, but because you stopped feeding it with the belief that there's something to defend. There's a Zen story Alan Watts loved to tell. A student asks the master, "How do I achieve peace?" And the master responds, "By not wanting peace." The student is confused. "But master, isn't the spiritual path about finding peace?" And the master smiles. The path is not about finding peace. It's about seeing that the war was imaginary. This is what nobody tells you about fear. The fight against fear is what makes fear solid. The resistance to fear is what gives fear power. The war against fear is what creates the enemy. Think about what happens when you feel afraid. Let's say you're about to give a presentation, or have a difficult conversation, or take a risk that matters. Fear arises. That's natural. That's just energy moving through the body. Just sensations, just thoughts. But then what do? You resist. You say, "I shouldn't feel this way. I need to be confident. I need to be strong. I can't let them see I'm nervous." And in that resistance, in that shouldn't, fear becomes solid. It becomes real. It becomes an enemy that needs to be defeated. But watch what happens when you don't resist. When you just let the fear be there. When you say, "Oh, there's fear. There's energy. There's sensation. Interesting." Without the story, without the judgment, without the fight, the fear doesn't grow. It doesn't consume you. It just moves. Like weather, like waves, it rises, peaks, and falls all by itself. Because fear, in its pure form, is just energy. It's life force. It's the organism responding to uncertainty, and there's nothing wrong with it. Nothing that needs fixing, nothing that needs overcoming. It's only when you add the story. This fear means something is wrong. This fear means I'm weak. This fear means I'm in danger, that the fear becomes a problem. Alan Watts said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." Fear is change. Fear is the unknown making itself known. Fear is life saying, "Here's something you can't control. Here's a situation where you don't know the outcome. Here's a moment where your carefully constructed identity might be revealed as a fiction." And you can fight it. You can armor up. You can prepare your defenses. You can go to war with the uncertainty. Or you can dance. You can move with it. You can let the fear be fear and still move forward. Still speak. Still risk. Still live. But here's what makes this difficult. Here's why everyone fights instead of dances. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that fear is evidence of weakness. That being afraid means something is wrong with you. And so you develop strategies, ways to hide the fear, ways to appear confident, even when you're trembling inside, ways to control the situation so the fear won't arise. And these strategies become your identity. I am someone who has it together. I am someone who doesn't get scared. I am someone who's always in control. And now you're not just dealing with fear. You're dealing with the fear of fear. The fear that if anyone sees you're afraid, they'll know you're not who you pretend to be. And this is the war that creates the enemy.
Because now you're not just experiencing a natural human emotion, you're defending an image, protecting a lie, fighting to maintain an illusion. And fear becomes the evidence that might expose you, so it must be hidden, suppressed, overcome, defeated. But what if you stopped? What if you just let people see that you're afraid? What if you stop pretending to be someone who never feels fear? Not in a dramatic way, not making a big show of your vulnerability, but just honestly, just allowing what's true to be true. I'm nervous about this. This scares me. I don't know how this will turn out. And what you'd discover, if you were brave enough to try, is that nobody cares as much as you think. Most people are so busy defending their own images that they don't notice yours cracking. And the few who do notice, the ones who are awake enough to see beyond the masks, they don't judge you for being human. They respect you for being honest. Because here's the secret. The people you admire most, the ones who seem fearless, aren't people who never feel fear. They're people who stopped.
They're people who stopped fighting it, who stopped pretending, who let themselves be afraid and moved forward anyway. Not because they overcame the fear, but because they saw that the fear was never the problem. The war against fear was the problem. And when you stop fighting, when you really stop fighting, something miraculous happens. The enemy disappears. Not because you defeated it, but because you recognized it was never an enemy. It was just energy, just life, just this moment asking you to be present instead of defended. So the next time fear arises, don't fight it. Don't try to overcome it. Don't pretend it's not there. Just be with it. Let it move. Let it exist. And notice that you, the awareness, witnessing the fear, are completely untouched by it. Completely free. Completely safe. Not because you built stronger walls, but because you realized there was never anything to defend. Alan Watts once asked, "What if when we die, the light at the end of the tunnel is just us being pushed out of another vagina?" People laugh at this, but beneath the humor is something profound. The fear of death, the ultimate fear, might just be the fear of birth, the fear of becoming something new, the fear of letting go of what you think you are. Because here's what most people don't realize about fear. What you're really afraid of is almost never what you think you're afraid of. You think you're afraid of failure, but what you're really afraid of is what failure would mean about you. You think you're afraid of rejection, but what you're really afraid of is discovering that you're not lovable. You think you're afraid of death, but what you're really afraid of is that you never really lived. Strip away all the surface fears, all the immediate anxieties, all the obvious dangers, and you find the same thing at the bottom. The fear of discovering that the self you've been protecting doesn't exist. That you're not who you thought you were. That the identity you've built so carefully might be a fiction. that the story you've been telling about yourself might not be true. And this is why fear is so persistent. This is why you can overcome one fear and another immediately takes its place. Because you're not actually afraid of the specific thing, you're afraid of what that thing might reveal about the fundamental instability of your sense of self. Let me give you an example. You're afraid of public speaking. Everyone says you need to overcome this fear. So you practice, you prepare, you visualize success, and maybe eventually you can give a presentation without your hands shaking too obviously. But have you overcome the fear? Or have you just become better at hiding it? Better at controlling the situation so the fear doesn't show? Because the real fear wasn't about speaking in public. The real fear was, what if I speak and they see I'm not as competent as I pretend? What if my voice shakes and they see I'm vulnerable? What if I forget my words and they discover I'm just making this up as I go? The real fear is that the performance will fail, that the mask will slip, that the carefully constructed identity of someone who has it together will be revealed as the fiction it always was. And you can spend your entire life fighting these fears, building stronger masks, creating more elaborate performances, controlling more and more variables so the truth never slips out. Or you can ask a different question. What if the truth isn't something to fear? What if being seen as you actually are, vulnerable and uncertain and making it up as you go, isn't the disaster you imagine? Alan Watts said, "The ego is nothing other than the focus of conscious attention." Think about that. The self you're defending, the identity you're protecting, is just where you're putting your attention. It's a spotlight, not a thing, a process, not an entity. And when you're afraid, all your attention goes to defending this.
When you're afraid, all your attention goes to defending this spotlight, making sure it only illuminates the good parts, making sure it never reveals the shadows. But what if you stopped controlling the spotlight? What if you let it show everything? The competence and the incompetence, the strength and the weakness, the knowing and the not knowing. What you'd discover is that people don't reject you for being human. They reject you for pretending not to be. They can feel the falseness. They can sense the performance. And it makes them uncomfortable. But when you stop performing, when you let yourself be seen as you actually are, something shifts. People relax because you gave them permission to be human too, to stop performing, to stop defending. And the fear that drove all the performing, it doesn't go away because you defeated it. It goes away because you saw what it was really protecting. An illusion, a story, a spotlight pretending to be a self.
If this is touching something deep, if you're beginning to see what you're really afraid of, share this video. Not for me, but because someone in your life is exhausted from performing. Someone is tired of the masks. Someone needs to hear that the thing they're most afraid of, being seen as they actually are, is the very thing that will set them free. So what happens when you stop defending?
when you let the masks crack, when you allow yourself to be seen in your beautiful, terrifying humanness. Let's go deeper. There's a beautiful paradox at the heart of this. The moment you stop defending yourself, you become invulnerable. Not because you're stronger, because there's nothing to attack. Alan Watts described this perfectly. To have faith is to trust yourself to the water. When you swim, you don't grab hold of the water, because if you do, you will sink and drown. Instead, you relax and float. When you defend, you create a target. You say, "This is me. This is what I am. This is what needs protecting." And now there's something to attack, something that can be hurt, something that can be destroyed. But when you stop defending, when you stop claiming any fixed identity, what is there to attack? If someone criticizes you and you don't identify with the criticism, where does it land? If someone rejects you and you're not attached to being accepted, what is lost? If someone tries to humiliate you and you're not invested in an image of dignity, where's the wound? This doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you accept abuse or allow people to harm you. The body still protects itself. Natural boundaries still exist. You still move away from actual danger. But psychological defense, the constant guarding of your image, your identity, your story about who you are, that stops. And with it, the chronic tension, the hypervigilance, the exhausting performance of invulnerability, all of it dissolves. I know this sounds impossible. I know every fiber of your being is screaming, but I need to defend myself. The world is cruel. People will take advantage. I'll be destroyed. And that's the voice of fear. That's the defender speaking. That's the illusion insisting it's real. But let me ask you this. In your actual experience, not your fears, not your stories, but your actual lived experience, when have you ever been destroyed? When has the you that you are, the awareness that witnesses all this, ever been harmed? Your body has been hurt, yes. Your feelings have been hurt, yes. Your plans have failed, your relationships have ended, your image has been damaged, your ego has been bruised. But you, the witnessing presence, the consciousness that's aware of all this, has it ever been touched? Has it ever been diminished? Has it ever needed defending? No, because it can't be. Because awareness doesn't exist in space and time. It's not an object that can be damaged. It's not a thing that can be destroyed. It's the space within which all things appear and disappear. And when you recognize yourself as this awareness, not as the body, not as the thoughts, not as the story, but as the consciousness itself, fear becomes absurd. Not because you've become so enlightened that nothing bothers you, but because you see that the you who was afraid never existed as a separate, vulnerable entity in the first place. Alan Watts loved the metaphor of the wave and the ocean. The wave looks at other waves and feels separate, vulnerable, temporary. I must defend myself against those bigger waves. I must protect my form. I must maintain my shape before I crash and disappear. But the wave is the ocean. It was never separate. Its form is temporary, yes, but its essence, water, is the same as every other wave, the same as the entire ocean. It can't be destroyed because it was never separate to begin with. And you are exactly the same. The form is temporary, this body, this personality, this life, but the essence, the consciousness, the awareness It's the same as every other being, the same as the universe itself. You can't be destroyed because you were never separate to begin with. And when you see this, when you really see this, defenselessness isn't weakness, it's freedom. You can move through life without armor, without walls, without the constant tension of protecting something that doesn't need protection. You can be criticized and hear it clearly without the filter of ego. If the criticism is valid, you can learn. If it's not, you can let it pass like wind through an open window.
You can be rejected and recognize the rejection isn't about your worth. It's about compatibility, timing, circumstances that have nothing to do with the essence of who you are. You can fail and see failure as feedback, not as evidence of your inadequacy. You can be vulnerable and recognize that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the courage to exist without pretending to be invulnerable. This is what it means to not have anything to defend, not because you've built impenetrable walls, but because you've recognized there was never a castle to protect, just this open field, just this infinite sky, just this present moment of being alive. And the fear that kept you defending, building, protecting, it dissolves. Not because you defeated it, not because you overcame it, but because you saw through the illusion that created it. There is no separate self to defend. There never was. And in that recognition, in that clear seeing, you become truly invulnerable. Not because nothing can touch you, but because there's nothing separate to be touched. So what does life look like when you stop defending? When you let the armor fall? When you allow yourself to be completely, radically, vulnerably alive? Alan Watts put it this way: the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple, and yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. When you stop defending a fixed identity, life becomes immediate, present, real, because you're no longer filtering every experience through the question, what does this mean about me? How does this affect my image? Is this making me look good or bad? You're just here, experiencing, responding, being. And this doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent. In fact, the opposite happens. You become more responsive, more authentic, more genuinely yourself. Because when you're not spending all your energy maintaining an image, defending a story, protecting a persona, all that energy becomes available for actual living. You can listen to someone without planning your response. You can feel emotions without judging them as good or bad. You can make decisions based on what's actually true, rather than what maintains your identity. You can admit when you're wrong without it being a catastrophe. You can say, "I don't know," without feeling inadequate. And relationships become
completely different because you're no longer relating from need. You're not using the other person to validate your identity, to fill your emptiness, to prove your worth. You can be with them as they actually are, not as you need them to be. And they can sense this. They can feel that they're not being used to maintain your ego. And they relax. They open. They become real too. But here's what nobody tells you about this path. Here's the part that's truly challenging. When you stop defending, when you let the armor fall, you don't become superhuman. You become human. Fully, completely, messily human. You still feel fear, but you're not afraid of the fear. You still feel sadness, but you're not defeated by it. You still feel anger, but you're not controlled by it. You still feel desire, but you're not enslaved to it. The emotions still arise. The sensations still move through the body. The thoughts still appear, but you're not identified with them. You're not defending against them. You're not pretending they're not there. You're just with them, like weather, like seasons, like waves. And this is where most spiritual teachings get it wrong. They make it sound like enlightenment means transcending your humanity, rising above the messy, complicated, emotional reality of being alive. But that's just another form of defense, another strategy to avoid what's actually here. Real freedom isn't about transcending your humanity. It's about fully inhabiting it, being completely present to the joy and the pain, the pleasure and the discomfort, the beauty and the ugliness, without defending, without pretending, without trying to be anything other than exactly what you are in this moment. Alan Watts said, "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." Your mind is like muddy water. When you're constantly defending, constantly fighting, constantly trying to fix yourself, improve yourself, overcome yourself, you're stirring the mud, making it murkier. But when you stop, when you just let yourself be, the mud settles. The water clears. Not because you did something right, but because you stopped doing something wrong. So what does this look like practically? How do you live without armor in a world that seems to demand it? You start by noticing. Just noticing when you're defending, when you're performing, when you're protecting an image rather than simply being. You don't judge it. You don't fight it. You just see it. Oh, there's the defender. There's the fear. There's the need to look good, to be right, to maintain control. And in that seeing, without judgment, without resistance, something shifts. The identification loosens. The grip relaxes. The armor becomes transparent. And then, in small moments, you can choose differently. You can let yourself be seen. You can admit vulnerability. You can speak truth instead of maintaining an image. Not as a grand gesture, not as a spiritual practice, but just as a simple recognition.
This is what's actually true right now. Let me just be with that. And what you'll discover, if you're brave enough to try, is that the disaster you feared doesn't happen. The self you thought would be destroyed never existed as something that could be destroyed. What remains is just this, just awareness, just presence, just life living itself through this temporary form called you. And that form doesn't need defending. It never did. It's the ocean pretending to be a wave. And when the pretending stops, when the defense drops, when the armor falls, what remains is just this vast, open, defenseless love. Not sentimental love, not conditional love, but love as the basic condition of existence. Love as what you are when you stop pretending to be someone who needs protecting. And this love, this defenseless presence, doesn't need to overcome fear because it sees there was never anything to defend. If you're still here, if you made it to the end of this transmission at 3 a.m, something in you already knows this truth. Something in you is tired of fighting, tired of defending, tired of pretending to be invulnerable. And I want to tell you something important. That tiredness isn't weakness. That exhaustion isn't failure. It's wisdom. It's your deeper intelligence saying, there has to be another way. And there is. But it's not the way you've been taught. It's not about becoming stronger, not about building better defenses, not about overcoming your fear through force of will. It's about seeing through the illusion, seeing that the self you've been defending is just a story, just a collection of thoughts and memories and beliefs that you learned to call me. And when you see this clearly, when you really see this, the fear doesn't need to be overcome. It just doesn't make sense anymore. You don't overcome fear by fighting it. You overcome fear by recognizing there was never anything to defend. Not because you're too enlightened to be hurt, but because you see that the you who could be hurt, the separate self who needs protecting, is a fiction. What you actually are, awareness, consciousness, presence, can't be threatened, can't be damaged, can't be destroyed. It's like being afraid your reflection in the mirror will be hurt. Once you see it's just a reflection, the fear becomes absurd. Alan Watts spent his life pointing to this truth in different ways. He'd say, you are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. You're not a separate self defending against a hostile universe. You're the universe experiencing itself through this particular form. And the universe doesn't need defending. It's already whole, already complete, already perfect in its imperfection. So what do you do with this? How do you live from this recognition? You don't need to do anything. That's the point. The doing, the trying, the efforting to overcome fear, that's the problem. You just see, you just recognize, you just allow yourself to be what you already are. Awareness, presence, life itself. And from that recognition, everything changes. Not because you changed, but because you stopped pretending to be someone who needed changing. The armor falls, the walls crumble, the defender retires, and what remains is just this breath, this moment, this inexplicable fact of being alive, without explanation, without justification, without defense. Just this.
Always just this. If this changed something in you, if you're ready to stop fighting and start seeing, share this video. Share it with someone who's exhausted from defending, someone who's tired of the armor, someone who's ready to discover that there was never anything to defend in the first place. And subscribe for weekly transmissions that go deep, really deep, to places where transformation isn't about becoming something new, but seeing through what was never real. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being brave enough to question the fundamental assumption that you're a separate self who needs defending. Because you're not. You never were. And in that recognition, in that simple, clear seeing, fear dissolves. Not because you defeated it, but because you saw through the illusion that created it. There's nothing to defend. There never was. And in that defenselessness, you're finally free. See you at 3 in the morning. Or rather, see you in this moment, which is the only moment that ever existed. The only moment where you're actually alive. The only moment where fear is revealed as the ghost it always was.